my God, it's so good to be back at EXP. I absolutely love you guys. Last year I almost had a heart attack running around this audience. So I'm really excited to be here. Hats off to the EXP crew for throwing another amazing conference. We got a lot to cover today, guys. I broke my talk today down into 15-minute segments. I know some of you have heard me speak before, some of you haven't. For those of you that haven't, the first 15 minutes of my talk will be very similar to what it was last year. The next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about how every single person in this audience can wake up like a Spartan warrior, can have a superhuman inside of them, and I'm going to bring it out of every person in this audience. I'm going to teach you how to wake up like a Spartan warrior and how to be a superhuman. So, who wants to be a superhuman? Amazing. And then we're going to spend 15 minutes talking about some of the most incredible research in the world right now. I just got back from the most humbling retreat of my lifetime. I was invited by Richard Branson to Necker Island with 40 of the top thought leaders from around the world. He took people from every industry that he thought were the greatest thought leaders. He put us all on an island for 4 days. No phones, no recording devices. We just shared and collaborated on research that is impacting humanity and some of the most profound discoveries in science that are changing the entire direction of humanity and health and wellness. And I'm going to share some of those with you today because you have no idea how powerful our mind really is. And I'm going to teach you how to access an area of your mind that you may not be tapping into every day, and it's robbing you of 75% of your potential. So we're going to unlock that in the third 15 minutes. And in the last 15 minutes of my talk, and I do this every time I take the stage, I make two big, bold promises every time I take a stage. And the first promise is if you do what I ask you to do today, I will add 7 years to the lifespan and the health span of every person in this room. Great. Who wants to do that? And the second bold promise is that I will take any ailment that you or a loved one suffers from, any ailment, whether it's an autoimmune disease, an emotional disorder, a mental disorder, it's hypothyroid, it's hypertension, any ailment that you or a loved one suffers from, and right here in front of this audience from this stage, I will tell you exactly what nutrient is missing from that body that is causing that condition to exist. And then I'm going to take 15 minutes of Q&A from you guys, so we've got a lot to cover. You guys ready to get going? All right, awesome. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Gary Brecka. I'm a human biologist, a researcher. I spent 22 years of my life in mortality research for large life insurance companies. And you see, large life insurance companies have a database. It's got 370 million lives in it. If that database that they hold could see the light of day, it would permanently change the face of humanity. It would upend modern medicine in a way that would be catastrophic. You see, there's 370 million lives in this database. And what this database has that no other clinical study has, no research study has, no university, no governmental agency, no other place on earth knows the day, the date, the time, the location, and the cause of death for 370 million lives. So they take that data and they pull it back into people's lives. And the team that I was on, if we were able to get 5 years of medical records on you and 5 years of demographic data, we could tell the insurance company how long you had to live to the month. And yes, it's that accurate. And if you want to know how accurate insurance companies are, just look at what happened in the financial services crisis, right? 2008, 2009, we had 364 banks fail. Not one life insurance company failed. There's no other financial enterprise on the planet that would take that much risk on one variable. 25 million, 50 million, or $100 million worth of risk, and the only thing that matters is how many more months does this person have left on Earth. So I worked in this research department. I read medical records 6-8 hours a day, 6 days a week for 20 years, and I was brainwashed by that industry because they led me to believe that this was just data, that I couldn't make an impact, that it didn't matter. I didn't have any influence. I didn't put these people in this position. I couldn't get them out of this position. It was not my responsibility. My responsibility was to take the data and tell my boss how many more months this person had left on Earth so they could charge them for a life insurance policy. And I realized one day that there were human beings on the other side of those spreadsheets. And I made a decision that day to turn in my resignation, to leave that industry, and spend the balance of my lifetime helping people live healthier, happier, longer lives. And so that's what I'm here to do today. And I'm in the process of building an army, because we need an army. If the pandemic didn't teach you anything about the intention of our government, about the intention of modern medicine, about the intention of our officials, then you must have been asleep at the switch. So it's not up to them, it's up to us, right? It's up to us. So I want you guys to be on my army. So I'm not going to hold any information back from you, because we learned two things when I was predicting mortality. Here's some of the mortality predictions that I did. But we learned two things when I was predicting mortality. And I say this every single time I take the stage. This is the most impactful statement you will ever hear in terms of how many more years you have left on Earth, your waking energy, your cognitive function, the depth of your delta wave of sleep, your weight gain, your water retention, your hormone balance, the entire trajectory of your life. And that is that the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. So I'm going to talk to you about how we get more of it, how we manage it better, and how we keep it at a level that helps human beings thrive and makes this entire biome inhospitable to disease, right? So the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. The second thing that we learned was that nearly every complication that we accept as a consequence of aging, weight gain, water retention, brain fog, ADD, ADHD, OCD, manic depression, bipolar, all kinds of mental disorders. The history of a genetically inherited disease is absolutely none of those things. It is a missing raw material from the human body, a deficiency that is leading to those diseases. You know, recently I was invited to speak at a very large age management medicine group conference. It was a room this size full of physicians. And when I took the stage, I could feel like the judgy McJudgerson-ness, you know, like if they weren't getting CE credits, not a single one of them would have been in the room. I mean, it was an oppressive level of hatred coming at me. And I said, let me ask you guys something. How many physicians in this audience right now, by show of hands, how many of you are treating patients for genetically inherited diseases? Genetically inherited diseases like hypertension, like hypothyroid, like hypercholesterolemia, hypertriglyceridemia, even drug and alcohol addiction, anxiety, depression, all of these diseases that run in families. And before I got through 5 diseases, every single hand in the room was up. And I said, while you have your hands up, understand if you're treating patients for these genetically inherited diseases, understand we've mapped the entire human genome. We know every gene in the human body. Can any of you tell me what gene causes any of those diseases? Every hand in the room went down. And I said, the reason why you can't tell me what gene causes any of those diseases is because that gene doesn't exist, which means that those diseases do not exist. And then I stood there for 30 seconds, and even more hate came to the stage. Like the hate-o-mammometer was all the way in the red, but no one could take issue with that. And if you're a physician, I invite you to take issue with that too. We do not pass disease from generation to generation. That is a lie that we have been sold, because we have an industry that is built around managing disease. But if we understood that what happens is we pass on something called methylation. We pass on the inability for our body to take a raw material, a vitamin, a mineral, an amino acid, a nutrient that enters our body, and convert it to the usable form. You see, just like we pull gasoline out of the ground, but we can't put it into our gas tank because the car doesn't understand that fuel source crude oil, until it's refined to gasoline. There is not a single compound known to mankind, not one. There's no vitamin, no mineral, no amino acid, no protein, no nutrient of any kind that we put into our bodies that is used in the form that we put it in. Without a single exception, everything we put into our bodies gets converted by our body into the usable form. If you cannot make this conversion, you have a deficiency. It is this deficiency that leads to those diseases. And that deficiency can be fixed. So that's what we're going to do today. You guys with me? All right. Woo! All right. So those are my 2 bold promises. I'll add 7 years to your life, and I will take any ailment that you or a loved one suffers from, and I'll tell you what nutrient is missing from your body. In fact, I might even call on some of you guys that took the gene test last year and supplemented and have had a life-changing result. If you had a terrible result, please stay quiet. But if you had a life-changing result, I want to hear from you. So the first test that I'm talking about is a gene test, and I'm going to go through this quickly because I covered it last year. But so many of us that have these conditions that we chalk up to a consequence of aging are not a consequence of aging. So many of you right now, more than 90% of this audience is walking around at 60% of your true state of normal. Even if you think you feel good, you have no idea how good normal feels. God meant for us to thrive, for us to have it all. And when we put the right raw materials back into our bodies, we start to thrive in ways we never thought possible. And so, thank you. Woo! I love you guys. Where was the lady that used to give me all the woos last year? Woo! Somebody used to give me woos. Every time I would say, she would go, woo! And then when I refused to do something, she's like, I'll give you a woo! So, all of these things, brain fog, high blood pressure, gut issues, all of these things are consequences of these 5 genetic breaks. There are 5 genes in every human being's body in this room that determine what raw materials you can convert into the usable form and what you can't. And when these genes are broken, this is where those conditions come from. And these can be fixed. These can be supplemented for, and they can be fixed. So we do not need to walk around with the kind of ailments like we do in society. If you look at the trends in modern medicine, diabetes is a $110 billion annual industry. Do you know that? $110 billion a year. Do you think that there's a meeting going on somewhere in a big pharma boardroom right now to put that out of business? Oh, no. If you said to me, nobody would ever say this, but if you said to me, Gary, write me a diet that would guarantee I get diabetes. You know what I would do? I'd go right to the American Diabetic Association website, I'd download their dietary guidelines, and I'd send them to you. That's how bad that is. Do it. American Diabetic Association. You know what they recommend for a type 2 diabetic first thing in the morning? Glass of orange juice, bowl of oatmeal with crushed brown sugar and natural honey. As a snack, yogurt with fruit on the bottom, 44 grams of sugar. Right? Do you know what that is? That's an insulin dependency diet. Do you know that Pfizer just paid $6.6 billion for Arena Pharmaceuticals? Do you know what Arena Pharmaceuticals does? Anybody know? Fixes myocarditis, pericarditis, and diffuse vasculitis as a consequence of vaccine injury. That's a fact. So we need to understand that sometimes the powers to be don't necessarily have our best interests at heart, but God has our best interests at heart. And He has given us everything that we need to thrive. And we're going to talk about how we tap into that today, right? So this is what this gene test looks like. It is a Q-tip. We stick it in your mouth and we rub your cheek. Or you order it and it comes to your house and you rub your cheek and you rub the cheeks of your family members. Only get that test for the people you love. The other ones will leave your life early. That was a joke. That was a joke. So you know what? Right before I came up here, somebody literally backstage told me, stay away from politics and stay away from the vaccine. I've already covered the vaccine, so I'll stay away from politics. Because they were like, don't talk about Joe Biden. I'm like, why would I talk about Joe Biden? But I can't help thinking, like if a spaceship landed in the United States, they all seem to land in Arizona, so that's where all the spaceships land. Actually, one landed in Vegas recently, but if a spaceship landed in the United States and they got out and said, take me to your leader, I just think about that once in a while. What would they think? We'll just leave it at that. So there, I covered politics and the vaccine, and 40% of the audience still likes me. Woo! Come on, take me to your leader. So these 5 genes. So what happens when these genes are broken? I put Grant Cardone down there because that's actually Grant Cardone's gene breaks. One of the reasons why I'm wearing this 10X Health shirt is because I fixed those genetic breaks in Grant Cardone and got rid of joint pain and sleeplessness and aches and pains in his body and brain fog. And as he realized the consequences of that in his business, he called me one day and said, Gary, your stuff works. if you can be in my office at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, I'll make you a rich man. And I was in his office at 1:59. The one meeting of my life that I was actually early for was with that man to make me a rich man. He kept his promise. So these 5 genes, everybody has those. When you have these genes that are broken, let me point some of these out. Do you see this gene right here? 44% of you have this gene not working. I won't tell you what the nickname is for that gene. Brett, I'm going to keep my promise. Where are you? Okay. I went to the speaker meeting this morning. Yes, that is called the MTHFR gene. If you ever want to look up research on that gene, please capitalize all of those letters, or you will find yourself on some really colorful websites. So this gene, 44% of you actually have a break in this gene. This is one of the most important genes in the human body because it takes folic acid and converts it into methylfolate. And while that doesn't sound like a big deal, folic acid is the most prevalent nutrient in the human diet. Folic acid, by the way, is an entirely man-made chemical. We make it in a laboratory. Folic acid does not occur anywhere naturally on the surface of the earth. You cannot find folic acid in nature. We make it in a lab, and then we have sold it to the public as a health vitamin, something that pregnant women need to have a healthy pregnancy. That's completely false. They need methylfolate to have a healthy pregnancy. 85% of all postpartum depression is directly related to the prenatal vitamin. There is not a single peer-reviewed published clinical study in the world linking pregnancy hormones to postpartum depression. There is tons of research linking that gene to postpartum depression. So what happens is when the most prevalent nutrient in the human body cannot be converted into something the body can use, you have a deficiency. And now what kind of things come from that deficiency? Well, the first thing is gut issues. You have gut issues and you think you have an allergy, but it drives you crazy because you eat the same thing over and over, and sometimes you have a reaction and sometimes you don't. Because it has nothing to do with what you're eating, it has to do with the pace of your gut. The speed of your gut is determined by that gene. If that gene is broken, you have suffered your entire life with gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, irritability, cramping, and you've never been able to pinpoint why. Because your body is missing a simple raw material called methylfolate. If you have this gene right here, there is about a 90% chance that you suffer from anxiety. And some of you may suffer from crippling anxiety, even borderline depression. You know what anxiety is? Anxiety is a fear of the future. It is an increase in your brain in a category of neurotransmitters called catecholamines, the same neurotransmitters that come out in a fight or flight scenario. How many of you suffer from anxiety or know somebody who suffers from anxiety? Holy cow. 70% of the room. You ask somebody that suffers from anxiety these 3 questions, I will prove to you that it is coming from that gene, and it can be fixed with methylated vitamins. And if anyone in this room has either had that problem and it's now fixed, or had a loved one who had that problem last year and it's now fixed, is there anyone in here that would like to tell that story? Because I ran into a couple people at the pool. There's one right there with their hand up. Can you come up this microphone? If you start to say something bad, I'm just going to burn one of your eyes out with this laser pointer.
Yeah. I've already cried on stage.
Nothing will learn you like losing an eye to a laser pointer.
Yeah, so it was last year when you said this talk, and my daughter, just crippling anxiety, and just very inward in everything she did, and I was all in, ordered it for the whole family, and so within like 3 weeks of being on the supplements, she was into horses. It's kind of her way of dealing, and all of that. And her horse instructor didn't even recognize her. She was yelling across the barn and just a totally different person.
Amazing.
She joined the cheerleading team at her school.
Woo!
And like just wildly different. She couldn't even get out of her seat to get on stage when her classmates were, just going on stage to graduate before. And she took 5 of the 8 awards.
Wow.
Just this past year.
That's amazing.
And she was on stage and waving at everybody and just...
She's on no drugs. She's on no pharmaceuticals. That little girl took that test and all she's taking is vitamins. That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we're going to change the world. You have this gene right here. You have a history of hypertension in your family. How many of you either suffer from hypertension or have a loved one suffering from high blood pressure? You see, high blood pressure is the second leading cause of death in America. And most of people that actually suffer from high blood pressure, when they go to their doctor, they have a normal EKG, they have a normal EEG, they have normal heart and lung sounds, they have a normal dye contrast study, they have a normal cardiac catheterization. All their cardiac workup is normal. Why do they have high blood pressure? Their doctor will tell you, because your father had it, and your grandfather had it, and your great-grandmother on your mother's side had it. You genetically inherited that hypertension. Next time you know what to say. Oh, what gene did I inherit that caused that? Watch their face go blank. What happens is when you have this gene mutation, you cannot lower an amino acid in your blood called homocysteine. If this is a naturally occurring amino acid, but genetically we break this amino acid down into another harmless amino acid which quiets our mind. And if we can't quiet our mind, now we're told that we have ADHD or ADD. That's another famous one, or OCD, right? And so if I can't actually lower that amino acid, then what happens is it rises in my bloodstream. As it circulates around in my bloodstream, my arteries clamp down. If you make the pipes smaller in a fixed system, pressure goes up. And now we hold the heart responsible for a crime it hasn't committed. And we start pounding on a perfectly healthy organ with beta blockers and calcium channel blockers and diuretics, trying to pound a healthy organ into submission for a crime it is not committing, and we do this for decades. You will never convince me that 44% of Americans are so depressed they need to be on an antidepressant. 51% of Americans over 55 years old have a failing heart to the point where it needs medical intervention. Or that nearly 60% of Americans suffer from a mental disorder. I'll never believe that. What I will believe is we are so nutrient deficient that without certain nutrients, we get the expression of those conditions. And so if you lower homocysteine, by the way, if you ever watched my video with Dana White, this is exactly what happened to Dana White. He was on 3 blood pressure medications. When I met him 10 weeks later, he was on no blood pressure medication. He had perfectly normal blood pressure. He was off of his antidepressants and off of his thyroid medication. And so we put these raw materials back into the human body, and that's how we just restore that vascular laxity to normal, and then the pressure returns to normal. Now, for you high-functioning entrepreneurs, if you have that gene broken right there, you have what's called consummate overachiever profile. You are your own worst enemy. You hold yourself to a very, very high standard. Right? You put a lot of pressure on yourself. You essentially decide the success or the lack thereof of your day by how many things you get done on an agenda that you set for yourself. You find yourself very easily disappointed in other people because you feel like they just can't do the basics. I know those laughs are like, yep, that's me, right there. I got spouses pointing at spouses. And when you lay down to go to sleep at night, you have a hard time falling asleep, not because you're not tired, but because your mind keeps you awake, right? So what happens is, as your environment quiets, your mind wakes up. So what if we could pull all these little anchors up off the ground? What if when you laid down, you could actually quiet the catecholamines and fall asleep? What if you could actually process thought in the right sequence, which is what we call attention deficit disorder? There actually is no such thing as ADD or ADHD. They are, trust me. Woo! I love you guys. I mean, I love you guys. Usually people are like, boo, and that's not true, and they need Ritalin, and they need Adderall, and they need Vyvanse. Interestingly, the same people that make folic acid, Monsanto, also makes Vyvanse and Ritalin. So folic acid is the leading cause of ADD, ADHD, and manic depression, and it's treated with Ritalin, Vyvanse, and Adderall. Just a coincidence, another coincidence I'll point out for you, not being a conspiracy theorist. So what happens is attention deficit disorder is not an attention deficit at all. It's an attention overload disorder. It is too many windows open at the same time. And so what happens is because we create thought at a faster rate than we dismantle thought, the mind gets clouded. You're thinking about a job you're working on. Your friend walks up. So you're thinking about a job, you start talking to your friend. While you're talking to your friend, you see a logo on their jacket. It reminds you of a vacation you want to take. Now you're thinking about a job, talking to your friend, looking at the logo, thinking about a vacation you want to take, right? All at the same time. And your friend's like, hey, Max, my grandmother died on Sunday. And you go, that's a great idea, right? That's when you know you got ADHD, right? So what if we could just put amino acids like L-methionine back into the body? L-methionine, as simple as L-methionine or trimethylglycine, amino acids that are already in your body, and you learn to down-regulate catecholamines. You learn to take those category of neurotransmitters that were in your brain, and you get to suppress them. You get to break down thought so that you can sequence thought properly. And now you all of a sudden don't have ADHD because you are not having an overactive mind. Modern medicine says if the mind is racing, let's put an amphetamine into the body, race the central nervous system to match the pace of the mind. That creates dependency. It creates something called tachyphylaxis. It can permanently alter the neuroplasticity of the brain. L-methionine is in your bloodstream right now. So if you have that gene mutation, you take L-methionine, you will notice a demonstrative change in your behavior. You will notice a night and day difference between children that have that MTHFR gene mutation, and you take them off of folic acid and put them on a methylated vitamin, and you have an entirely new child in the house in 3 to 7 days. Happens that fast, right? Instead of the school calling you and saying, little Johnny's not paying attention, he's disruptive, he doesn't finish his work, we need to bring in the Ritalin. Right? So every single person that hasn't gotten that test, I want every human being to do that test once in your life. It's about $600. It's a gene test. You put the cheek swab in your mouth. You send it into a lab. They send it back. You will never guess what you need to supplement with for the rest of your life. You will stop supplementing for the sake of supplementing, and you'll start supplementing for deficiency. And when you supplement for deficiency, you start to thrive. And so that's my pitch. Now, moving to part 2. Because now we're going to have some real fun. I want to talk about something called the Superhuman protocol. Because the Superhuman protocol is basically taking everything from Mother Nature that is good from outside and bringing it in. You have 2 choices. You can pay $150,000, which a lot of our patients do, for the Superhuman equipment, or you can do it for free. Which one do you want me to explain to you guys? I knew you guys were cheap, yeah. So what is so amazing about the research that is going on now in longevity, in anti-aging, in biohacking, and in optimization. And when I was on Necker Island with Richard and these thought leaders, it really hit me that everything has now come full circle, and we're just getting right back to the basics. The further we get away from the basics, the sicker we become. Human beings were originally built to spend 85% of our time outside. The average human spends less than 2% of their lifetime outdoors now. So now what's happened when we've come indoors? We've stopped contacting the surface of the earth. Do you know that the earth is a giant magnetic field? Think about the last time that you had bare feet touching bare soil, dirt, grass, or sand. That's the last time that you discharged into the earth. And this is very real. By the way, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I took a voltage meter. I plugged it into the dirt in the sand, into the ground. And I held the other pole of this voltage meter, and I showed you how there was 0 voltage going through my body. I was standing in tennis shoes. Then I took my shoes off, and I stepped on the surface of the earth, and the pin pegged all the way to the right-hand side. So what happens when we touch the surface of the earth? It's called earthing. It's called grounding. You see, we don't want it to be this easy, but it is. Right? When we touch the surface of the earth, we discharge into the earth. It actually changes the polarity of the body. It can shift the alkalinity in the blood. It can change the polarity of 32 trillion cells in the human body in 6 seconds. And we don't touch the surface of the earth anymore. What we did was we came up with a PEMF mat, pulse electromagnetic field mat, that you can put in your bed and get the same thing as grounding. But you can take your shoes off and contact the surface of the earth for 5 minutes, 3 times a week, and maintain that same polarity. The science has now caught up to the magnetism of the earth and the impact that actually contacting Mother Earth has on human beings. The second thing that we don't get enough of is light. The number 1 nutrient deficiency in the world is vitamin D3, the single most important nutrient in the human body. 50% of this audience is clinically deficient in vitamin D3. 85% of the African American population and Latinos, because of the pigment of their skin, are deficient in vitamin D3. This is why COVID disproportionately affected minorities. Had nothing to do with their minority status. It has to do with the pigment of the skin. The darker your skin, the lower the vitamin D3. The lower the vitamin D3, the higher the all-cause mortality and the weaker the immune system. right? In fact, one of the worst things that we did during the pandemic was further weaken our immune system by social distancing, residential quarantining, masking, right? You know what human beings were meant to do? They're meant to do what we're doing right now, right? Interact with other human beings, right? That builds a strong immune system. One of my favorite sayings is that aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. The more aggressively we pursue comfort, the faster we age. The reason why most of us don't exercise or take cold showers or do cold plunges or like to diet and deal with a little pang of hunger is because we don't like to be uncomfortable. The more comfort we seek, the faster we age. We've got to stop telling grandma not to go outside, it's too hot, not to go outside, it's too cold, just to lay down, just to relax, to eat at the first pang of hunger. That's all nonsense, right? The body has a response called hormesis, where you stress it and it strengthens. And we're going to talk about how we can tap into that. So the second thing is light. We are light beings. The truth is most of us are not getting enough sun. It's not that we're getting too little sun. So when I wake up in the morning, the very first thing I do, and I don't care how cold or hot or rainy or windy it is outside, I go outside in a pair of shorts. My neighbors think I'm nuts. I go outside in a pair of shorts, don't I? Every single day. You can ask my wife. And I go out and I take my shirt off and I get 15 to 20 minutes of sunlight and I do 8 minutes of deep breath work. Every single day, like clockwork. It will change the trajectory of your life, right? And then the last thing that we talk about is oxygen. So you can use a hypermax oxygen system, or you can learn to do breath work. And there's several styles of breath work. There's all kinds of breath work that's out there. Last year we talked about breath work. There is a style of breath work called haka breathing. How many of you ever heard of that? Woo! Oh, is that because you guys follow me, or do you actually know what that is? The haka dance, have you ever seen like the All Blacks in Australia? They do those crazy dances before rugby games. You know why they do that? It increases the oxygen content, it improves physical performance, it raises their emotional state, it elevates their mood, and it is pain modulatory, right? They actually don't feel as much pain during contact. So how would you guys like to learn a 60-second breathwork technique so you could wake up like a Spartan warrior every single morning? You guys want to do it right now? All right, because so after this breathwork technique, they are definitely going to think we're a cult, right? So, you know, the spaceship's coming, we're all going to heaven, right? I knew there was something weird about that crew. And now they're definitely going to think it. So what this has to do with is, you know, breathwork does several things for us. What it's going to do, it's going to change the oxygen tension in our tissue. It's going to change the ratio of gas in our tissue. The second thing it's going to do, it's going to raise our emotional state. It's going to elevate our mood. Because believe it or not, every emotion that a human being can experience, every single emotion that is an elevated emotion, passion, elation, joy, arousal, libido, all the heck yeah, I won the lottery emotions. If you actually looked at that molecule, it has oxygen as a component of its structure. If you pull oxygen out of that molecular structure, you can't have that emotion. This is why no human being has ever woken up laughing. But you can wake up angry. Why can you wake up angry but not wake up laughing? You don't have the oxidative state to experience laughter, but anger, vengeance, despair, jealousy, depression require zero oxygen. Right? If you want to do a fun little experiment tonight, wait till your spouse is in a deep sleep and give him a good deep pinch. Watch him wake up really angry. Well, hey, Gary was right. I was just checking it out. You know, that's not on me. You didn't wake up laughing, see? He was right. Really smart human biologist. So if we want to reach elevated emotional tears, we need to have the oxidative state to reach elevated emotional tears. So that's what we're going to do. The fourth thing that it does is it releases sirtuins. How many of you have ever heard of a sirtuin? You know what a sirtuin is? It's a survival gene. It happens when we slip under the ice. It happens when we get too close to a fire. It happens when a lion gets too close to us and threatens us. They are called sirtuins. These scour the body of free radical oxidation. They increase the rate of protein synthesis, and you can access them for free every single day. You guys want to do it? All right. It's going to get a little weird in here. All right, so you're just going to sit. First, we'll just put our hands comfortably on our laps. Men, what I want you to do, men, is I want you to make a fist. And when I tell you, we're going to tap up on our chest like this. You are not trying to knock your boob over your shoulder, right? It's like somehow it becomes like a mankind. It's like, hit themselves in the face. You're going to take your fist and you're going to tap up on your breast like this. And we're going to do it 4 times. Wait till I start it. We're all going to do it together. We're going to take a deep breath in like this. And when we breathe out, we're going to say the word ha 4 times, and we're just going to tap our chest like this. Ha, 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 ha. Women, you're going to cross your hands, raise them up, and you're going to tap your fists on your shoulder. Okay, so, and we're going to take a deep breath in, and on the way out, you're going to say ha, 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 ha 4 times. I know this sounds crazy. Wait till we do 3 of these breaths and wait till you see how you feel. You're going to release sirtuins. We're going to raise our emotional state. We're going to elevate our mood. We're going to flood the brain with oxygen. You guys ready to go? All right. I want an obnoxious breath in. We're going to do 3 rounds of this. Ready? A deep breath in. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, 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 ha. Woo! Yeah. Now, aside from offending your neighbors and everybody else in the hotel, if you actually did that on your balcony every morning, you would wake up like a Spartan warrior, right? My poor wife has to listen to it every day, and then I'm so chit-chatty when I'm done. She likes to sleep in. I come in, and I want to tell her all about my day and get stuff off my chest. I used to have a whole Instagram special. It was called Good Morning Babe. And right after I would do breath work and haka breathing, I would go in and wake her up and go ooka chaka ooka and dance on the bed. She one time on Instagram in front of 500,000 people, she threatened to stab me in the neck. You did. I still have the video. So in any case, so we're going to get oxygen into our bodies. I'm going to talk about supplements in a second because, I don't want anybody to just start taking supplements for the sake of supplementing. I want you to do that gene test. We have a booth outside, by the way, the 10X Health booth. I want you to go to that booth and talk to those guys about how to get that gene test for you and your family once, and then never guess on what you need to supplement with. And now I want to talk about the brain. Because Joe Dispenza and MIT, woo, you guys like Joe Dispenza? All right. Oh, I really love you guys. We're working on filming a documentary called The Frequency of Truth. And part of the documentary is about the power of the human brain, which we are only now beginning to understand. God is so much more powerful than modern medicine that it's unbelievable. The capability that this has to influence the environment around it, to heal the environment around it, to heal itself is absolutely uncanny. In Scandinavia, they just did a clinical trial, a clinical study on terminally ill cancer patients. By the way, any of the studies that I ever talk about from the stage, if you'd like to see those, they're on my link tree on Instagram, or I'm happy to send you these articles. I am a science nerd, so if you ever would like to know what study I'm referring to, I'm happy to send that study to you. But what they did was they took 2 groups of people. Both of these people were diagnosed with the same terminal illness. Only they took one into one room and one into another. And with one placebo group, they told them the truth about their illness, that it was terminal, the percentage chance of 5 years survival, and that modern medicine had exhausted everything that they had, and there was essentially nothing they could do other than to extend them palliative care. Hospice palliative care. They took an identical group of people into another room and they said, you have this type of cancer, but luckily for you, you qualify for a clinical trial. And in this trial, we've had a 100% cure rate. 100% of the patients that have qualified for this trial have gone into remission. And you're so lucky you have the tissue type that matches this trial. And so there's virtually 100% chance that you're going to go into remission. What they measured was the shift in frequency, the shift in that person's emotional state. And what we realize now is that there's an area in the brain called the amygdala. When you feel emotion, any mood, any emotional state that you can feel, you are experiencing that emotion in an area of the brain called the amygdala. Okay, and what's special about this area, if you're happy, if you're elated, if you're upset, if you're angry, you're feeling that in that area of the brain called the amygdala. What's interesting about the amygdala is that it is the only gateway to the hippocampus, to the memory. There is only one hallway that you can go down to reach your memory. And that is through the amygdala, which means your emotional state determines what memories you retrieve. Well, your memory links to the prefrontal cortex, your conscience. And your conscience is your future. And so what this means is that your current emotional state determines your future. If you do not learn to master your emotional state, you will never take control of your future. So, woo! So my whole reason for existing in life is because I want to elevate the emotional state of humanity. I want to elevate the mood of humanity by putting the right raw materials into your body so you can manufacture the neurotransmitters to stay in an elevated state. So you retrieve healthy memories, you think healthy thoughts, and you project a very healthy future, right? And so imagine the emotional state of someone who was just told they had a terminal illness versus the emotional state of somebody who was actually told there's virtually 100% chance they're going to live. Just compare those two emotional states. And imagine what memories they started to access. And then imagine what their conscience began to think of. And imagine what happened to their future. 47% of terminally ill patients went into spontaneous remission. That's almost half of the patients in that study. Right? This is the power of frequency. This is the power of the human body. This is the power of the mind. We can actually use this to our advantage to influence the world in a positive way around us. Last year, you might have heard me talk about the Spain scale of emotion, the scale of positive and negative emotion, right? Where they took participants, they put them in a room, it's called a Faraday's cage, it's devoid of frequency. They started to measure frequency leaving a human being's body, and what they realized was that the most powerful frequency to leave a human being's body, somebody yell it out, authenticity. If you want to influence the world around you, everything from your children to the people that you interact with, to a client you're trying to gain a listing from a team you're trying to motivate, from a spouse you're trying to convince, from a child you're trying to discipline, if you can master the frequency, if you can emanate the frequency of authenticity, you can actually change their emotional state. This is a fact, by the way. You know, we say that women are more intuitive. Have you heard that? Okay, that's actually not true. Women are more sensitive to frequency. We call it intuition. It's a sensitivity to frequency. I can't even tell you how many times my wife has said, nope, not that guy. Something's a little, I just can't put a finger on it, but I don't like him. I'm like, but babe, look at his shoes, and he's got a nice suit. Drove a Ferrari. How bad could he be? And 6 months later, I'm taking the knife out of my back, right? How many of you guys can identify with that, right? So you are sensitive to this frequency of authenticity. It's the most powerful frequency to leave a human being's body. There's a law in physics called constructive interference. Look it up if you'd like. It says if two frequencies of equal wavelength meet, the size of the frequency doubles. This proves the universal law of attraction, right? The universal law of attraction is actually a law in physics. So, but the point is, most of us don't understand how to master this in our lives. So I'm actually going to teach you a technique to master our emotion, to pull from the right memory, to project the proper consciousness, to change our future. And it is powerful enough that when you use it in business and in life and in your career and in your relationships, you will see the entire trajectory of these change. It is so powerful that it will influence the decision-making capacity of another individual. Because we know now that emotion is what triggers our memory, and memory triggers our conscience, and our conscience is our future. We also know what percentage, by the way, I'll just ask you, what percentage of decision-making is emotional? By the way, this was just published in the Journal of Neuropsychology. What percentage of decision-making is emotional? 95? 100? Not quite 100. Maybe with my wife it's 100. But 75 to 78% of decision-making is emotional. So what should be the most important thing that you do before you get on a phone call or a team meeting or a Zoom to motivate your team? You should, first of all, you should master your own emotion. I'm going to tell you how you do that. You should try to impact the emotional state of the people that you're talking to. In fact, if I could teach you how to influence the emotional state of a client, then when you went to get a listing, if you actually trigger the right emotion in that client that makes them recall the proper memory, they will decide to give you that listing. So how many of you would like to do that? All right. So let's talk about how we tap into this, right? And this is, I'm far along right now, but this is what's about to be published in our documentary. So first of all, these areas of the brain need certain amino acids, they need certain vitamins, they need certain nutrients, because this entire cascade happens by neurotransmitters. So the second way that you can tap into it is to get yourself in a state of authenticity. Authenticity only occurs when two things are present. Number one, when your words are truthful. And number two, when you believe what you're saying. If either one of those is not present, you cannot actually emanate the frequency of authenticity. And by the way, this is part of the clinical study, the Spain scale of emotion. I'm happy to send that to you. So this is what some women pick up on, because somebody's words are not truthful, or they don't believe what they're saying. And we don't pick up on that, but very often women will pick up on that and say, there's just something that's not adding up here, because that person is not emanating the frequency of authenticity. So if you want to shift into an authentic state, I want you to do this before your next team meeting. I want you to do this before your next client meeting. I want you to do this before your next big event, so that you can actually have influence over that person in a positive way. Okay, you ready? So first, it starts with intention setting. And second, it moves to something called visualization. But only about 5% of the population really understands the power of visualization. When I work with athletes and top fighters in the UFC and running backs in the NFL, part of what I do is I teach them how to visualize outcomes. Never, ever, ever visualize the journey. If you visualize the journey, you will set yourself up for failure. If you visualize the destination, you will set yourself up for success. This is why I love being a man of faith, because it's not only delayed gratification, but I already know where I'm going, right? So I know what the destination is, so all the stuff in the middle doesn't bother me so much. But so here's how we do it. How do we set our intention? So for example, before I got on this stage today, I sat quietly in a chair back there, closed my eyes, I took 3 deep breaths like this, and I thought about what was my intention of getting on this stage today. My intention was to add value to your life, right? So that's the only reason why I'm here right now. For the next 60 to 90 minutes of my life, I said I'm going to give everything that I can so I can provide value to this audience. And then I created a picture of every person in this room hearing my words, believing those words, agreeing to put those words into action, of thanking me for speaking. And I actually lived that moment, right? And then when I got up here, I didn't have any fear. And my words were truthful, and I believed what I was saying, so I was able to deliver an authentic message. And we can use the same thing in business. We can use the same thing when we're getting on a call to motivate our team. So the first thing we do is we take 3, put your hands just like this. Everybody just close your eyes. And we're going to take 3 deep breaths through our nose, and we're going to let it out through our mouth. Ready? Second one. Third one. Now in this state, this is where we set our intention. What is my intention of this team meeting? Do I intend to motivate my team? Do I intend to inspire my team? What message do I want them to receive? Only use one word to describe your intention. And once you know what your intention is for this meeting, right? I want to gain this listing. I want this person to give me the trust and confidence to sign over their home to me and my team. I want to motivate my team. I want to take the people that are straggling, I want to bring them back into the herd. So you set the intention. The second thing you do is you visualize the outcome. And this is where visualization goes wrong. I want you to create a picture of the end destination, the end of that meeting. Everybody thanking you for being inspiring today, thanking you for the message that you gave them. I want you to see that client shaking your hand, congratulating you on gaining that listing because they had the trust and the confidence in you. And then I want you to open your eyes. And now that you set your intention and you visualize that, you know what you've done? You've set your emotional state. You're now in an authentic state. Guess what happens in your hippocampus? Your hippocampus records everything in a picture. Memory is stored in pictures. When you hear a song that reminds you of a loved one, it's not the song that's in your memory, it's the image that's in your memory. That song triggered an emotion, and that emotion linked to your memory. And then you formed a picture of that last time that you were around that loved one. Right? That's why you can be driving down the road and you can hear a country music song and all of a sudden tears come to your eyes because it reminds you of your mother or your father or a loved one that's left your life, right? That is an emotion triggering a picture. So if you actually change your emotional state through breath work, set your intention, which sets your emotion, form a picture, now what happens to your conscience and your future? Your brain starts to live that. And you will emanate the frequency of authenticity. Authenticity will hit that person's body. Authenticity will match the frequency in their body. It will raise their elevated emotional state, and they will have no idea why they trust you so much, why they are so confident in you, but they will give you that listing. Your team will be inspired. You will find that your objection hits with more meaning. And so that's how we start to set ourselves up for these kinds of events. Try it. It takes about 60 seconds to shift into that state. Wait till you see the hormetic research that is coming out on this, on the capacity for human beings to influence the world around them. You know, in the animal world, this is how animals are eliminated and killed and how they seek safety and stay together. If you look at how dolphins use sonar, if a fish separates from the school, they can send sonar into a school of fish and find the one fish out of 15,000 fish that is not emanating the right frequency, and they can go right into that school of fish and hit that fish. When a lion is hunting a herd, they look for the weakest animal, and they separate that weakest animal. In human beings, we can have the same kind of influence on one another by emanating the frequency of authenticity. Did you guys find that helpful? Yeah. All right. Woo! All right. I said, they're like, don't talk about science, don't talk about politics, don't talk about the vaccine. I think we covered it all. Like, any other sensitive subjects we need to go over? So everybody asked me what my morning routine is. I'm going to run through my morning routine. I'm going to teach you how to wake up like a Spartan warrior. Woo! And I'm going to tell you 3 things you need to take out of your diet, 3 things you need to put into your day so you can start to become a superhuman. These are all for free. And then I'm going to open it up for questions and testimonials. There's a microphone right there, and I think there's a microphone over here. Yeah, there's a microphone right here if you have questions. And because if you have a question and I take that answer, probably people in the audience have the same answer. My morning routine is very, very simple. I wake up in the morning, I find sunlight, I go out in a pair of shorts, I sit in sunlight, I do 8 minutes of breath work every single day. My wife will tell you I never, ever, ever, ever miss. I will miss a commercial flight not to miss breath work. I didn't miss it this morning. I don't miss it when I travel. You can actually set your circadian rhythm by this. So when you change time zones, if you breathe at the same time every morning, your body knows this is the time to wake up. I clear catecholamines from my brain. I make my body inhospitable to disease, to pathology. I raise my mood. I raise my emotional state, and I get it all from God, and I get it all for free. All right? Woo! So first thing in the morning, I get natural sunlight, and I do an 8-minute breathwork routine, and it looks just like the breathwork that you guys just did. Sometimes I do the haka breathing unless somebody is sleeping, and I don't like to wake them up. But I do 3 rounds of 30 breaths, deep breaths. I do 30 of those breaths. I hold my breath as long as I can. I take a deep breath in. I do 30 more of those breaths. I hold my breath as long as I can. I take a deep breath in, I do 30 breaths, hold, take a deep breath in, and I'm done. It takes about 8 minutes to do that breath work. It takes a lot longer now. I can actually hold my breath for 4 minutes in between rounds of breath work. When I started, I could only hold my breath for 30 seconds. Now I can do 30 breaths and I can sit for 4 minutes. So that's what takes the longest amount of time. So I do breath work, then I go out and I get first light. I do my breath work, I get 10 ounces of water. By the way, the first thing I want you to get out of your diet, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, is tap water. Never, ever, ever, ever again drink water out of the tap, right? And the reason for this is, look, if you don't, if having a water filtration system is not in the budget, get a Brita water filter that at a minimum gets chlorine and fluoride out of your water. If you have seen the clinical trials, the clinical studies in the last 15 months coming out on fluoride, they are absolutely devastating. They're devastating. Harvard University just launched a study through the Freedom of Information Act. We sued the CDC and the FDA, and we actually got the research that they kept suppressed on water. If you don't believe me, you can go to the National Institute of Health, look up the study yourself. There is 0 levels of safe fluoride in human beings. It's a neurotoxin. They find that the higher the fluoride concentration in the water, the lower the IQ in every state where they studied this. So stop drinking tap water. If you need to, just go buy a $6 or $10 Brita water filter. If you want to know the filtration system that I use, there's a link on my Instagram. I don't have any affiliation with this company, but I put everything that I use in my own life there, so I want you to get tap water. What's that? Oh, wells are fine. Yeah, so well and septic is fine. It's the tap water that's bad. It's the concentration of fluoride. I try to ground myself every day. If I can't ground myself, I lay on a PMF mat. If you don't want to spend the money on a pulse electromagnetic field mat, take your shoes off and touch the earth for 10 minutes 3 times a week. I know this sounds simple. You know, when I talk about breath work and sunlight and cold showers and things, it seems so simple that people don't want to do it. I promise it can change the trajectory of your life. I do a cold plunge. If you don't have a cold plunge, turn the water as cold as you can make it, step into it for a minute and just deal with it. Stop pursuing comfort stop aggressively aging by pursuing comfort. Okay? So that is my morning routine. I would really like to open up the room to questions, any ailment that you or a loved one suffers from. And maybe if you could come up to the microphone if you're comfortable enough to ask the question in front of this group. I'd really love to answer it for you because this is where the real value comes into play. Oh, and then I take my supplements.
What's the 2 other foods?
There are 2.
Oh, what's the 2 other things that I want you to get out of your diet? So first is I want you to stop drinking tap water. The second is I want you to get rid of seed oils. Seed oils. I got censored all over Instagram. My entire account deleted by the fact checkers for it. I never said seed oils are bad. I said industrial processed seed oils are bad. So let's just cover this for 10 seconds. You take a canola oil plant. You press it. It comes out like gum. So how do you degum it? They use hexane, a neurotoxin, to degum it. Then they take degummed neurotoxic oil and they heat it to 405 degrees. That makes it rancid. Now it smells so bad they can't bottle it, so they deodorize it with sodium chloride, which is a known carcinogen. Now it's deodorized, but it's cloudy, so they make it clear by bleaching it with chlorine. So they take a neurotoxin, they add a carcinogen, and then they bleach it with chlorine. And then they put it on the shelf and they serve it to you. You need 4 oils in your life. You need a coconut oil for cooking, a ghee butter, a grass-fed butter, or tallow. You need an olive oil and an avocado oil at room temperature. That's it. That's all you need, right? So 4 to cook and 2 to use for salads and dressings and everything else. If it's a palm oil, a sunflower oil, a safflower oil, guys, these are rancid, toxic, inflammatory, neuroinhibitory chemicals that we're putting into our body. So I want you to get those out of your body as well. Yes, sir.
My dad has ankylosing spondylitis where the spine is fusing itself together. What would you say for something like that? Yeah,
so ankylosing spondylitis is also known as candle wax spine, right? So it's actually where if you actually look at the spine on an x-ray, it'll look like candle wax. It'll look like those are dripping. This is actually not an issue with the bone. It's an issue right above the discal space with something called the periosteum. And if you actually Google amniotic stem cell and ankylosing spondylolisthesis. I know that's a big word, but I want you to put the word amniotic stem cell in front of it. You're going to see some of the most astounding clinical trials where they're actually able to repair the periosteal layer of the bone and stop this waxy dripping, stop the spine from actually starting to disintegrate in on itself. We always used to think that once these pathologies had started that they were irreversible. We know now that that is absolutely not true, right? We don't just have to manage disease. We can stop it and reverse it. So if you'd like to see me after the break, I'll give you some links to some of the research and some of the places in California that are actually treating that. Yeah, naturally. Woo! Yes, ma'am.
So 2 questions. Last year we were here and my husband stood up and he has Parkinson's disease. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you were able to answer that question last year. I don't recall. But
yes.
The second part of it is you talked about genetic diseases, things like that, but I had a son who passed away of adrenoleukodystrophy, which is an X-linked genetic disease.
That is a true genetic disease.
And then I have a son who's now 27 who tests positive for that but hasn't shown any symptoms. And I guess I'm just wondering what can be done, like if it's X-linked versus genetic, like you talked about, and then what is possible for Parkinson's?
Yeah, so let me answer the first one real quick, and then I'll answer the second one. So the first one with Parkinson's. So Parkinson's is a neuroinflammatory disorder, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is inflammation in the nerves. So if we can reduce the inflammatory cascade, right, and we can heal the myelin in the nerve, then we can stop or even reverse the symptoms of Parkinson's. We also know now that Parkinson's disease is linked to the gut bacteria. There are actually gases that are emitted from gut bacteria. When we are absent certain flora, we are absent certain, gut flora, we're absent certain necessary gases in our gut. And these actually go up to the brain and they cause neural inflammation. You would not believe how much of our health and wellness is actually related to the health of our gut. When we destroy our gut with antibiotics, and we destroy our gut with artificial sweeteners, which, by the way, you know, aspartame is about to be named by the World Health Organization as a known carcinogen. It's about to be outlawed in all European countries. It will stay in the United States for 10 years, right? Because we're the only governmental agency in the world that uses something called single-dose toxicity to decide whether or not we can poison our population.
Ridiculous.
Right? We don't use cumulative dose toxicity, we use single dose toxicity. So Parkinson's, I'd love to give you some of the research on Parkinson. There's something called resveratrol. There's another product called Stem Regen, which is shows extreme promise in treating Parkinson's disorder. But there's also a product called TSO 1000, which repopulates the gut specifically with the flora that combats the neuroinflammatory condition in Parkinson's.
So we did those 2 tests last year. I mean, not 2, we each did your test. And you said it's one time. Does that mean that results will never change?
The results will never change. The genes you're born with are the genes you die with. That's why that test is so important, because now you're supplementing for deficiency. Remember that DNA exists in the exact same form in every single cell in the human body. If it's broken in one cell, it's broken in every cell. So there's nothing more impactful for human beings than changing our DNA. So supplying our DNA with the raw material it needs to do its job. Right? I mean, DNA only has 2 roles, replication and transcription. Create a perfect copy of itself and give commands to the cell like a CEO. So when the DNA is not giving the right command, the cell dysfunctions. When the DNA doesn't replicate perfectly, this is where you get dysfunction. All cancer is DNA replication run amok. If you didn't have DNA replication was not impaired, you could not have cancer. Right? And this is the same issue with the vaccine, right? We took a message from the nucleus of the cell called a messenger RNA, and we made a permanent copy of it. And we injected this into human beings, and now that permanent copy never stops giving the command to the cell. When the DNA gives a command, it eviscerates in 2 hours. When a synthetic messenger RNA enters the human body, it never turns off the signal. The cell never stops producing the nucleocapsid protein. Right? So we're only now beginning to know the consequences of that. But I'd love to talk to you more about
the second part. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about the Parkinson's offline, so we can just get to a few more questions.
And maybe about my son's disease too, when you have.
No question. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Ooh, that was serious. Mine is kind of vague.
You're like, how do I lose belly fat?
Oh, man. No, it's actually rosacea. I'm curious about rosacea. I was diagnosed with that, and they told me there's no cure. It's an autoimmune disease. I call pull.
Yes. So autoimmune disease as a general category is actually not autoimmune disease. It's autoimmune weakness. Okay. All autoimmune disease is not, it's a progressive dysfunction of the immune system because it's too weak. Right? It's a weakening of the immune system. And so autoimmune conditions generally are where the immune system is dysfunctional, right? It doesn't know the difference between friendly tissue and foreign tissue. But what makes it incapable of recognizing friendly or foreign tissue, whether it's rheumatoid or Sjogren's or any number of autoimmune conditions, is because the immune system is so weak. So we have a theory in modern medicine that we should weaken the immune system to keep it from attacking itself. We should actually strengthen the immune system so it can properly tell the difference between healthy tissue and foreign tissue. We know now, for example, Crohn's disease, which we call an autoimmune disease, is not the immune system dysfunctioning. It's the immune system properly doing its job, attacking bacteria in the luminal wall of the intestine, but we try to shut the immune system off instead of getting the bacteria out of the wall.
Okay, so
Right?
more sunshine, more dirt on the feet.
No, so rosacea, yeah, more sunshine, more dirt on the feet.
Yeah.
Breathwork, sunshine, dirt on the feet, and cold showers. But rosacea is a secondary route of waste elimination for the liver. So you want to heal the liver with glutathione.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir.
All right, Gary.
Dude, I like. Are you guys liking this?
Yeah.
All right. Because I know this. I got about a few more minutes, and I really want to add some value. Yes, sir.
Pulmonary emboli.
So pulmonary embolism is, it depends on what's causing the pulmonary embolism, right? So I mean, deep vein thromboses are a big cause of pulmonary embolism. I actually, Sage and I just actually flew to Dubai a few months ago. When we got back, one of the passengers that we flew with actually dropped dead in the baggage claim area from a pulmonary embolism from what's called a deep vein thrombosis. I did 30 minutes of CPR on them while U.S. Customs just stood around and just watched me. No one even knew what an AED was for the wall. But so when you travel, you'll wear compression gear, especially if you're on a flight over 5 hours. But one of the best ways to avoid deep vein thromboses and pulmonary embolisms is to make sure that your blood stays at the right viscosity. This is why I think every single person needs to know more about your own biome than you do about your business. Like when I go up to you and you can tell me your income statement, your balance sheet, and your P&L, but you can't tell me your blood sugar, your hormone levels, or your nutrient deficiencies, that tells me where you're oriented, right? This is our temple. You guys should get information on your temple, and you should feed it with things that serve your temple, don't steal from it, right? Because we often wonder why we're in this condition, and then you ask them, well, what has your sugar been like? What have your hormones been like? What nutrients are your body missing? They have no idea. They find out when disease or pathology or embolism strike. So the best way to avoid DVTs and pulmonary embolisms and embolisms of all kinds is to keep your hematocrit level, your blood viscosity at the right viscosity, and you can check that on a blood test.
Okay.
Right?
Right now it's been blood thinners because there's no evidence of any deep vein thrombosis or anything else. So a lifetime of blood thinners as a defense mechanism, no interest in staying on those.
So there's something called Viniveretrol, and there are other things you can do like regular blood donations to keep your blood thin. And let's talk about it at the break because I've got to close things off right here. But guys, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope you feel like you got some value out of today. I love you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you.